The clock on the wall ticked quietly as sunshine streamed through the tall windows of room 203. Zoe Jackson sat in the back row of Mr. Baker's advanced calculus class, her pencil moving quickly across the page as she solved the warm-up problems. The classroom smelled like dry erase markers and floor cleaner, familiar scents that usually made Zoe feel at home. Not today. 5 more minutes, Mr. Baker announced, pacing between the desks with his coffee mug in hand. Zoe double-checked her work and set her pencil down. She had studied until midnight for this class, determined to understand every concept. Math had always been her favorite subject, a world where hard work led to clear answers. Her parents had taught her that education was the key to everything. Her mom worked long hours as a hospital supervisor, and her dad fixed complex electrical systems. They'd been so proud when she got into this advanced class. Around her, 27, other students were still writing, erasing, sighing in frustration. Zoe glanced at the empty desk beside her. Ty, her friend since middle school, was out sick again. Without him, she felt even more alone in this classroom. "Time's up," Mr. Baker said, setting his mug down on his desk with a sharp click. "Who wants to show us the solution to problem 3? The question hung in the air. Problem 3 had been tricky, an integration problem with multiple steps. Zoe had worked through it twice to make sure she had it right. She took a deep breath and raised her hand. Mr. Baker's eyes scanned the room, passing over her raised hand once, then twice. Zoe stretched her arm higher. "Nobody?" Mr. Baker asked, his eyebrows raised. "Come on, folks, this is advanced calculus. You should be able to handle this." Zoe waved her hand slightly, wondering if she was somehow invisible. "Sir?" called out Ryan from the front row. "I think Zoe has the answer." Mr. Baker's gaze finally landed on her, and something shifted in his expression. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed that look, a slight tightening around his mouth, a coolness in his eyes that didn't appear when he called on other students. Ms. Jackson," he said, his voice carrying a note that made several students look up from their notebooks. "Let's hear your attempt." Zoe straightened in her chair. "For this integration problem, I used substitution first. If you let u equal x squared plus 1, then do equals 2x dx, which means—" "Stop," Mr. Baker interrupted, holding up his hand. "You're already on the wrong track. This is exactly why I hesitated to call on you." Heat crawled up Zoe's neck as she looked down at her paper. She was sure her approach was correct. It matched the examples in the textbook. "I'm pretty sure that works," she said quietly. Mr. Baker walked toward her desk, each footstep loud in the silent room. "Perhaps, Ms. Jackson," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you should consider transferring to regular math. You're not smart enough for this level of work." The words hit like a physical blow. Zoe's hand, still halfway raised, slowly lowered to her desk. The classroom went completely quiet. No shuffling papers, no clicking pens, not even breathing. 27 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Lisa Chen, who sat in front of Zoe, turned around with wide eyes and mouthed, "What the heck?" Kevin, 2 seats over, was staring at Mr. Baker in shock. This wasn't the first time Mr. Baker had singled her out, but it was the most obvious. Last week, he'd returned her quiz with a C, even though her answers matched Ty's A+ paper. The week before, he'd ignored her questions after class, saying he had a meeting to attend, only to spend 20 minutes helping Brad with the same homework problems. Zoe felt a lump forming in her throat. She was the only black girl in the class, one of only 3 black students in the entire AP math track at Westlake High. She'd worked twice as hard to get here, staying after school for extra help in freshman year, joining the math club even though it meant missing basketball practice sometimes, and now in front of everyone, she was being told she didn't belong. "I'd be happy to show where your approach falls apart," Mr. Baker continued, holding out his hand for her paper. "It might be educational for everyone." With slightly shaking fingers, Zoe handed over her work. As Mr. Baker began picking apart her solution on the whiteboard, she noticed something strange. He had skipped a step in her work, making it seem like she'd made a mistake she hadn't actually made. "Sir," Zoe said, her voice quieter than she intended, "I think you missed—" "No interruptions, Ms. Jackson. If you can't follow this explanation, That only proves my point. Across the room, Priya frowned and flipped through her textbook, then whispered something to Hannah. Hannah nodded and raised her hand. Yes, Hannah? Mr. Baker said, his tone instantly warmer. I think the textbook actually uses the substitution method that Zoe was starting to explain. On page 214, Mr. Baker's face flushed slightly. We're not discussing the textbook's method right now. We're examining why Ms. Jackson's approach doesn't work for this particular problem, but it did work. Zoe knew it did. She'd solved the entire problem correctly. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of everyone. She felt a light tap on her shoe and looked up to see Dion, who sat across the aisle, sliding a folded paper toward her desk with his foot. She carefully unfolded it under her desk. Your answer was right. I use the same method. He's being unfair. D. The bell rang, startling everyone. As students began packing up their belongings, Mr. Baker called, Out. Problem set due Monday, Ms. Jackson, a word after class. Zoe slowly put her notebook into her backpack, her stomach tight with dread. As other students filed out, several gave her sympathetic glances. Priya whispered, That was messed up, as she passed. When the room emptied, Mr. Baker didn't even look up from his desk. Your work isn't meeting the standards of this class. I suggest you consider transferring before the quarter ends. Save yourself the embarrassment of failing. Without waiting for her response, he turned to his computer, dismissing her. Zoe walked out into the hallway, her mind racing. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right. She pulled out her phone and opened her camera app, switching it to video mode. From now on, she would document everything. If Mr. Baker thought she would just give up and disappear, he had seriously underestimated who he was dealing with. The rain tapped against Zoe's bedroom window as she flipped through her math notebook. On a fresh page, she'd started writing down dates and descriptions. September 15th, ignored my raised hand for entire class. September 18th, marked problem. 4 wrong, even though answer matched solution manual. September 20th, called my question elementary and refused to explain. 3 weeks had passed since that awful day in calculus class, and things had only gotten worse. Zoe reached for her phone and scrolled through the videos she'd secretly recorded. In yesterday's class, Mr. Baker had praised Kevin for an answer, then criticized Zoe for saying essentially the same thing 5 minutes later. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ty. Got the quiz back, B+. What did you get? Zoe typed back, C. Third one in a row, makes no sense. Send me a pic of yours, I'll compare. Zoe snapped photos of her quiz and hit send. While waiting for Ty's response, she stared at the college pennants on her wall. Howard University, MIT, Georgia Tech. Places that had seemed within reach just months ago. Now she worried her grades in advanced calculus would ruin everything. Her phone buzzed again. This is messed up. Your answers on number 3, 4, and 6 are exactly the same as mine. And look at his comments. He's nitpicking your work but not mine. Zoe flopped back on her bed. Was she imagining this whole thing? Was she being too sensitive? No, the evidence was right there in black and white. Zoe, dinner's ready. Her mom called from downstairs. At the dinner table, Zoe pushed her food around her plate. The smell of her dad's famous jerk chicken usually made her mouth water, but tonight she couldn't work up an appetite. Everything okay at school, sweetheart? Her dad asked, setting down his fork. You've been quiet lately. Her mom looked up sharply. Is it that calculus class you've been studying twice as hard but seem half as happy? Zoe hesitated. Her parents worked so hard. Dad often took night shifts fixing electrical systems at the hospital where Mom managed the administrative staff. They were always telling her to focus on education, to push through challenges. Would they think she was just making excuses? It's Mr. Baker, she finally said, her voice small. I think he doesn't want me in his class. Her parents exchanged looks. What makes you say that, Zoe? Her mom asked carefully. Once Zoe started talking, everything poured out. The public humiliation, the unfair grading, the dismissive comments. She showed them the comparison of her quiz with Ty's, explained how Mr. Baker twisted her words in class. Her dad's expression darkened with each example. This is discrimination, plain and simple. We can't jump to accusations, her mom cautioned, though her voice was tight with anger. The school will just get defensive. So what, we do nothing? Her dad countered. No, her mom said firmly. We get proof. Zoe's already started documenting things. That's good thinking. She turned to Zoe. Keep recording everything. Save all your graded work. Compare with classmates when you can. Your mom's right about the evidence, her dad added, reaching over to squeeze Zoe's hand. But I want you to know, we believe you, 100%. For the first time in weeks, Zoe felt the knot in her stomach loosen slightly. Her parents believed her. The next day at lunch, Zoe sat with Ty and Priya at their usual table in the corner of the cafeteria. The room buzzed with conversation and the clatter of lunch trays. Look at this, Ty said, sliding his notebook toward Zoe. I went through my old quizzes. My grades in Baker's class have averaged 91%. Yours? 76%, Zoe replied. Even though I was getting 94% in honors pre-calc last year, Priya, who wore her debate team pin on her jacket, had been unusually quiet. Have you noticed who Mr. Baker calls on the most? She asked suddenly. I was counting yesterday. Out of 23 questions, he called on white students 18 times, Asian students 4 times, and you exactly once, only after Ryan pointed out your hand was up. And that's when he shut you down, Ty added grimly. Zoe poked at her cafeteria pizza. I scored higher on the placement test than half the class. I belong there just as much as anyone. Priya nodded firmly. Everyone knows you're one of the smartest students in our grade. Baker's just threatened because you catch his mistakes. That comment sparked something in Zoe's mind. She sat up straighter. You know, it did start getting worse after that day I corrected his derivative example. The product rule mistake? Ty asked. That was back in August. Zoe nodded slowly. He wrote out the solution wrong, and I raised my hand to point it out. He seemed fine at the moment, even thanked me, but the next day was when he started ignoring my questions. Fragile ego, Priya said, rolling her eyes. Classic case of a teacher who can't handle being corrected, especially by... She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. They all knew what she meant, especially by a black girl. What are you going to do? Ty asked. Zoe took a deep breath. I'm not dropping the class if that's what Baker wants. My parents said to keep gathering evidence. We'll help, Priya said immediately. I can keep track of who he calls on each class, and I'll share my graded work with you, Ty added. For comparison. After school, Zoe stopped by the library. Ms. Rivera, the librarian, smiled as she approached the desk. Zoe, looking for those MIT brochures I set aside for you? Actually, Zoe said hesitantly, do you have any books about dealing with teacher bias? Ms. Rivera's smile faded into concern. Is something happening, Zoe? For a moment, Zoe considered telling her everything. Ms. Rivera had always been supportive, but would telling a staff member make things worse? What if the school closed ranks to protect Mr. Baker? Just doing research for a paper, Zoe said instead. On her way home, Zoe's phone pinged with a notification from the school's online grading system. Another C on yesterday's homework. She stopped walking, a cold determination settling over her. This wasn't just about her anymore. What about other students who might face the same treatment in the future? What about her brother, who would start high school in 2 years? She opened her recording app and spoke clearly. September 27th, got C on homework. Same answers as Ty, who got an A. This has to stop, and I'm going to be the one to stop it. The gymnasium hummed with nervous energy as students from 12 different high schools set up calculators and sharpened pencils. Bright morning sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the rows of tables arranged for the regional mathematics competition. Zoe took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She hadn't told many people she was competing today. Mr. Baker had made it clear he thought it was a waste of time. You do realize the competition includes questions from calculus, statistics, and number theory? He'd said when he saw her name on the school sign-up sheet. Certain students are setting themselves up for public embarrassment. She'd simply nodded and walked away. Let him think what he wanted. After 6 weeks of intensive study with Dr. Patel, morning sessions with Ty and Priya, and countless late nights with her college-level textbook, Zoe felt prepared. "There's our math star," came a voice behind her. Zoe turned to see Mrs. Chen, the Westlake High Math Department chair, smiling at her. "I was thrilled to see your name on the participant list." "Thanks for coming to support us," Zoe said, surprised. To see her there on a Saturday. "Wouldn't miss it," Mrs. Chen replied, then lowered her voice. "By the way, Dr. Patel speaks very highly of your work. She's an old friend of mine." Before Zoe could respond, she spotted Mr. Baker across the gymnasium, wearing a judge's badge. Her stomach dropped. No one had mentioned he would be judging. Mrs. Chen followed her gaze. "Don't worry about him. There are 15 judges, and they use a blind grading system. Your paper will be identified only by your contestant number." Bidar. Announcement came for all students to take their seats. As Zoe walked to her assigned table, she passed Kevin and Hannah from her calculus class, who had also entered the competition. "You got this," Kevin whispered, giving her a thumbs up. Zoe settled into her chair, arranging her pencils neatly beside the blank answer booklet. At the front of the gym, a woman in a blazer explained the rules. There would be 3 rounds: algebra, and geometry, calculus, and finally a lightning round of rapid-fire problems across all mathematical disciplines. "Remember," the woman concluded, "show all your work. Partial credit may be awarded for correct approaches even if your final answer is incorrect." A bell rang, and the first set of problems was distributed. Zoe read through them quickly. Most were straightforward: quadratic equations, circle theorems, basic trigonometry. She worked methodically, double-checking each solution before moving on. When the calculus section arrived, Zoe felt a small surge of confidence. The first problem involved implicit differentiation, exactly what she'd challenged Mr. Baker on. The second was a complex integration problem requiring substitution, precisely the technique she'd been using when he'd first humiliated her in class. As she worked through each problem, she could almost hear Dr. Patel's voice in her head. "Look for symmetry. Consider alternatives. Trust your instincts." By the time they reached the lightning round, Zoe was in a flow state, barely noticing the gym full of people. Numbers and symbols seemed to dance on the page, revealing patterns and solutions with a clarity she'd never experienced before. When the final bell rang, Zoe set down her pencil and stretched her fingers. Around her, other students were comparing answers, some looking confident, others worried. She caught sight of Mr. Baker collecting papers at the front table, his face unreadable. "How'd it go?" Ty asked, finding her during the break while the judges scored the papers. I think I did well," Zoe said cautiously. "There was one problem in the lightning round I wasn't sure about, but everything else felt solid." "That lightning round was brutal." Kevin joined them, shaking his head. "I completely blanked on the series convergence problem." For the next hour, competitors and spectators milled around the gym, snacking on provided cookies and juice while the judges deliberated in a separate room. Zoe spotted her parents entering the gym and waved them over. "Sorry we're late," her dad said, giving her a quick hug. "Mom's car had a flat tire." "They haven't announced anything yet," Zoe assured them. "But I think I did okay." Her mom squeezed her shoulder. "We're proud of you no matter what. Just competing took courage." Finally, the judges filed back into the gymnasium. The woman in the blazer approached the microphone. "We had an exceptionally strong field of competitors today," she announced. "Before we reveal our winners, I want to acknowledge the hard work of every student here." Zoe held her breath as the woman announced the honorable mentions, then the third-place winner, a senior from Lakeside Prep whom Zoe didn't know. Our second-place winner with an outstanding performance, particularly in the calculus section, from Westlake High School. Zoe prepared to applaud for Kevin or Hannah. Zoe. "Jackson." For a moment she thought she'd misheard. Then Ty and Priya were shouting, her parents were beaming, and Mrs. Chen was nodding proudly. In a daze, Zoe walked to the front to accept her medal and certificate. As she shook hands with the organizers, she caught sight of Mr. Baker among the judges. His face was frozen in disbelief, his usual composure shattered. The first-place winner was announced, a senior from Wilson Academy who had won the competition the previous year as well. As they posed for photos, the boy leaned over to Zoe. "That was impressive," he said, "especially since you're a junior. You'll probably take first place next year." Back at her table, Zoe was surrounded by well-wishers. Mrs. Chen pulled her aside, eyes bright with excitement. "Second place is the highest finish for a Westlake student in 15 years, she said. "And you know what's even more impressive? You had the highest calculus score of any competitor today." Zoe couldn't help glancing toward Mr. Baker, who was speaking with another judge, his back stiffly turned toward her celebration. Monday morning, Zoe walked into calculus class with her head held high. As soon as she entered, several classmates broke into spontaneous applause. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she smiled and took her seat. Mr. Baker cleared his throat loudly, silencing the room. "Congratulations to our students who participated in Saturday's competition," he said stiffly. "Let's move on to today's topic." For the entire class period, he pointedly avoided calling on Zoe, even when hers was the only hand raised. As the bell rang, he announced, "Pop quiz tomorrow on L'Hôpital's rule, which we haven't covered yet. I suggest everyone read ahead." Priya rolled her eyes as they walked out. "He's punishing the whole class because he can't stand that you proved him wrong." "It won't work," Zoe replied. "The study group can cover L'Hôpital's rule today after school. I already have notes from Dr. Patel." By lunchtime, word of Mr. Baker's pop quiz had spread. To Zoe's surprise, their usual study group of 5 had grown to 15 students. "Can you explain this concept?" asked a sophomore who had just joined. "I heard you're the best person to learn from." As Zoe began explaining the rule, she caught sight of Mr. Baker passing the library doorway. He paused, looking in at the group of students huddled around her, all focused on their work. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Zoe didn't look away. Neither did he. Then he turned and continued down the hall, his footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. He can give all the surprise quizzes he wants, Zoe thought as she turned back to her eager classmates. He can't stop us from learning. The local newspaper lay open on the kitchen table, Zoe's photo smiling up from the front page of the community section. The headline read, "Westlake High Junior breaks records at regional math competition." "They called me for a quote," Mrs. Chen had told Zoe yesterday. "I made sure they knew how exceptional your achievement was." Now, as Zoe's mom read the article aloud during breakfast, Zoe felt a mix of pride and nervousness. The article mentioned her future plans to study mathematical physics at MIT, her record-breaking calculus score, and quoted Mrs. Chen calling her one of the most gifted mathematics students I've encountered in 20 years of teaching. They tried to contact Mr. Baker for a comment, her mom read, then looked up with raised eyebrows. It says he replied no comment when asked about his exceptional student. "Of course he did," Zoe's dad muttered, buttering his toast with more force than necessary. "It's fine," Zoe said, though it wasn't. After 3 days of increasingly difficult pop quizzes on advanced material, the message was clear. Mr. Baker was doubling down. Her phone buzzed with a text from Priya. "Have you seen the school website? Check the home page." Zoe pulled up the II site to find her competition photo featured in the student spotlight section. Principal Wong had written a personal congratulation, noting that Zoe's achievement had brought honor to Westlake High and demonstrated the excellence we strive for in our academic programs. Another text came through, this one from Ty. "Baker looks furious, just passed him in the hallway." Zoe set down her phone, suddenly not hungry. The attention was nice, but it was making her situation with Mr. Baker even worse. What would he do, next to try to prove she didn't belong in his class? Her mom seemed to read her thoughts. "I think it's time for that meeting," she said quietly. "What meeting?" "With Principal Wong. I've been gathering everything. Your documentation, the grading comparisons, Dr. Patel's assessment. With this newspaper article, the timing couldn't be better." Zoe's dad nodded. I called this morning and got an appointment for Thursday. But Zoe hesitated. What if it just makes things worse? What if they don't believe me? What if Mr. Baker denies everything? Her parents exchanged looks. That's why we've been so careful with the evidence, her mom explained. And we're not going in demanding he be fired or anything dramatic. We just want the unfair treatment to stop. On Thursday afternoon, Zoe sat between her parents in Principal Wong's office, trying not to fidget. The wall behind the principal's desk was covered with framed certificates and photos of smiling students at graduation. Thank you for coming in, Principal Wong said, her expression serious. Mrs. Chen has briefed me on some of your concerns, but I'd like to hear directly from you, Zoe. Taking a deep breath, Zoe began explaining the situation, the public humiliation, the unfair grading, the pattern of behavior that had started after she corrected Mr. Baker's mistake. Her mom handed over the folder of evidence they had compiled, including side-by-side comparisons of Zoe's work with classmates who had received higher grades for identical answers. And these recordings? Principal Wong asked, looking at the list of audio files on Zoe's phone. Zoe has been recording the classes, her dad explained. Michigan is a one-party consent state for recordings, so this is completely legal. The principal nodded slowly. I appreciate how thorough you've been. Too often these situations come down to one person's word against another's. We didn't want to come forward until we were sure, Zoe's mom said. And truthfully, we're not here to get Mr. Baker in trouble. We just want fair treatment for Zoe, and any other student who might face this kind of bias. Principal Wong leaned forward. Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss. After Mrs. Chen mentioned your concerns, I took the liberty of reviewing Mr. Baker's grading patterns across all his classes for the past 3 years. She turned her computer screen so they could see a spreadsheet. We tracked demographic data for internal equity audits. What we found was troubling. There's a clear pattern of lower grades for certain groups of students, particularly Black and Hispanic students, even when controlling for test scores and previous math performance. Zoe felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't just her. It wasn't in her head. So what happens now? Her dad asked. Mr. Baker has been called for a meeting tomorrow with myself, the superintendent, and the district's legal counsel, Principal Wong said. Based on the evidence, there will be consequences, though I can't discuss the specifics due to personnel confidentiality. She turned to Zoe. What I can tell you is that you'll have a different teacher for advanced calculus starting next week, and your grade will be recalculated based on a review of your work by Mrs. Chen. The next morning, Zoe walked into school to find a buzz of whispered conversations. By lunchtime, everyone had heard. Mr. Baker had been seen leaving the principal's office looking pale and shaken. By final period, the official announcement came. Mr. Baker would be taking early retirement, effective immediately. Mrs. Chen would take over the advanced calculus class until a permanent replacement was found. When Zoe entered the classroom on Monday, the atmosphere was noticeably lighter. Students talked freely before the bell, no longer afraid of arbitrary pop quizzes or public humiliation. I heard they found a pattern going back years, Kevin whispered, as Zoe took her seat. My cousin said the school board is implementing some kind of bias training for all teachers now. Good, Zoe said simply. As the semester came to an end, Zoe's recalculated grade in calculus rose from a C to an A. The student study group she had started continued to meet, even after Mrs. Chen took over the class. What had begun as a necessity had become a community. On the last day before winter break, Principal Wong made a special announcement over the intercom. Westlake High is proud to announce the creation of a new STEM Equity Scholarship, to be awarded annually to a student who demonstrates excellence in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, with special consideration for students who have overcome obstacles in their academic journey. She paused before adding, This scholarship has been named the Zoe Jackson Excellence in STEM Scholarship, in honor of our own Zoe Jackson, whose courage and academic achievement have inspired this initiative. In the hallway after the announcement, Zoe found herself surrounded by classmates offering congratulations. Priya hugged her tightly. You did it, not just for yourself but for everyone who comes after you. That afternoon, a letter arrived from MIT. Zoe's hands shook as she opened it, an invitation to their summer intensive program for promising high school students. In her application essay, she had written about overcoming educational bias, describing it not as a victim story, but as a problem-solving challenge worthy of a mathematician's mind. The following September, as Zoe began her senior year, she was asked to speak to the incoming freshman class during orientation. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of nervous young faces, she thought carefully about what message would have helped her most 2 years ago. There will be times, she began, when someone will tell you you're not smart enough, not good enough, that you don't belong. Sometimes they'll say it because they genuinely don't know better. But sometimes they'll say it because your intelligence, your talent, your presence threatens them. She paused, making eye contact with a small girl in the front row who reminded her of herself. Remember that their limitations are not your own. Their doubts are not facts. And when someone tries to tell you who you are or what you're capable of, well, make sure they're prepared for the possibility that they've picked the wrong person to underestimate.